Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Canada's capital was the center of attention for local governments from across the country. With more than 2,500 municipal leaders gathering in Ottawa for the annual Federation of Canadian Municipalities Tradeshow and Convention last month, a landmark event that brings together communities of all sizes and backgrounds to share ideas, elevate concerns, and help shape the national conversation on municipal priorities. Now, the agenda was full and forward looking, touching on everything from bail reform to calls for stable, predictable federal funding to mental health and addiction, and the growing concerns of misinformation in our ever digital age. Among those attending were delegations from all corners of the province of Alberta. We first sat down with Strathcona County Mayor Rod Frank, who spoke to us about attending this year's convention and what he gets from the 4-day conference that he can bring back to Strathcona County. Mayor Frank, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting at the FCM conference here in beautiful Ottawa, Ontario. What brings you, the Mayor of Strathcona County, here to Ottawa for the FCM conference?
Well, it's something that we've been doing every year when I've been in office anyhow, but it's the one national conference that all the municipalities or most of the municipalities come to, so it's where everybody is, number one. Number two, the main value I would say is networking here, meeting other municipalities, finding out what's going on in their communities. The education is probably even secondary to the networking, and the advocacy that we all get together on is very important.
What are the issues that are similar in Strathcona County that you're hearing here in Ottawa this week?
Yeah, I mean, municipalities, the infrastructure that they have to keep up with, the services they have to keep up with, it's not matched by the revenues that they're able to generate. And it's a huge concern for communities across this country.
Prime Minister Kourtney spoke on the very first day of the conference, and he was talking about housing. And housing seems to be a challenge in every single municipality that I speak to. I've spoken to people from Strathcona County, and it seems to be an issue in Strathcona County as well.
Yeah.
How do you see this new government, with Prime Minister Kourtney leading it, addressing the housing challenge to help people in Strathcona County get affordable and into their very first homes?
Yeah. Well, I think the leadership is important. I do think that all three levels of government have to work together on this, though. Not one can do it alone. The federal government's talking about cutting some of the planning costs. They have a limited role in that. So I think it does take all three levels of government to work together on it.
Are you optimistic that they can?
I think it's going to take a big, bold move. I look at moves like at the end of World War II when the veterans came back and there was federal and provincial acts that were created to enable housing. I think it's something on that scale. I honestly do. You know, young people are facing housing issues that we never... In my generation, you got a job, you work for a couple of years, you got enough money together for a down payment and you got a mortgage. That doesn't seem possible anymore. And what's happened is the inflation on housing has gone like this, and the increase in wages has gone like this. It hasn't kept pace. So I do think it's going to take a federal and provincial act of that nature to really get us out of this hole. I do.
One of the big concerns that I'm hearing, especially from the more rural parts of Canada right now, is access to markets. Strathcona County is a rural base, but it's an agriculture and industrial resource-based community. How do you see being part of FCM helping address some of those issues around resource markets and getting our resources to Tidewater, whether it be Churchill, whether it be Prince of Rupert, whether it be just down south to America? Do you see a role of FCM playing in that, and where does Strathcona County fit into that role?
Well, I'd love to see FCM be active in that area. Our industrial base in Strathcona County is second to none. Yep. It's $55 billion of investment. It's 40,000 direct and indirect jobs. It's a huge part of our GDP in Alberta. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if FCM is even focused on that. They're in some ways probably unaware of it. We do what we can. We advocate as strongly as we can. But we realize our community has to work very strong on its own with the other levels of government to really advance the ball. I mean, we love the help of FCM, but they've got other priorities too.
So I guess that leads into my very political question, but I feel like as the mayor, you should be able to answer this. What does Strathcona County get from FCM that they wouldn't be able to get by themselves?
It's it's coming.
Besides the networking that you talked about at the
To
beginning.
me, that is the main thing, is the networking, right? I mean, it's not good to work in isolation. And you have to find ways to tie into the agenda of other levels of government. And when you can do that with an army of municipalities behind you, that has a lot more leverage with these different levels of government. So that's what I see. I see strength in numbers.
And my final question for you is, what happens next? You head back to Strathcona County later on this weekend. Does the conversation stop there, or are you a little bit more optimistic heading out of this convention that things are going to start to get done around municipal infrastructure funding, resource development, resource access?
Actually, I am optimistic because I do think that everybody realizes the crisis that we're facing with international trade, that the country has to come together. I think that there's still a lot of division provincially and federally, unfortunately, so hopefully that can be mended in some way so we can all move forward together. And I also feel the vibe of the conference is improving in the sense that they're more open to Western Canadian viewpoints. So yeah, I think I've been coming to this conference for 7 or 8 years now, and I really do feel the vibe is getting stronger to realize, look, we're just not based in Ontario. This is a national organization.
And next year, it's right down the street
is,
from you
yes.
in beautiful Edmonton, so you must be happy about that.
Yeah, no, it's great to host and to show people our part of the country, and we can make them jealous of the Stanley Cup. That's our plan, so yeah.
Mayor Frank, always a pleasure to sit down with you.
Thank you for the
so
interview.
much. Now, our hometown of Calgary, Alberta was at the convention as well in Ottawa. We chatted with Ward 11 Councillor Kourtney Penner about attending and her topics that she was focused on over the course of the convention. Councillor Penner, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting at the FCM convention. What brings you to Ottawa for the FCM convention as a City of Calgary councillor?
Yeah. Hey, Chris, how are you today?
Not bad.
Good. I just wanted to check, before we get going.
It's what we do best here.
Yeah. So FCM is always a really great opportunity, not only to connect with my peers from across the province who also travel here, but get to speak with other councillors and representatives from across the country to understand the issues that we're facing, where there's similarities, and maybe where there's some opportunities to think about how we solve the challenges together.
And what are the similarities that you're hearing here today in Ottawa that are similar in Calgary?
Yeah, so a couple things that are really standing out for me. So one is housing. So even though there's not a lot of panels on housing, I think everyone's top of mind about housing. I think the other thing is across the province right now, there's a number of municipalities who are evacuating for wildfires. And so while that may not affect Calgary directly, Calgary has often been the reception center for many of those communities, as we've seen. And so I think actually the collective acknowledgement around the climate crisis, about the changing nature of our weather patterns, of fires in particular, and how we're going to address those. What we've heard also is like the role and the responsibility of the federal government to step up and support those communities. So that's an important part of the conversation as well.
This is the first convention after when it was held in downtown Calgary. We're here, and the new man on the block, Prime Minister Mark Carney, gave his address to delegates yesterday, the very first day. What did you hear from Mark Carney that you can feel a little bit optimistic about heading back to Calgary, knowing that this is a new government, same party, new government, but new Prime Minister as well? Yeah,
so one of the great things that the Prime Minister is talking about is modular housing, and actually this is something that Calgary is leading on, in particular our wholly owned subsidiary Attainable Homes, and they have partnered with ATCO Structures to be doing actually on the ground builds of modular housing in Calgary. So there's one site that's going to start, that's in production actually right now at ATCO Structures facility in Calgary, and the boxes will be dropping in the summer. And then there's another one that is planned. And so we actually already have expertise in this area around modular housing. ATCO Homes, which is another like arm's length of ATCO, is doing some work with a production facility in Lethbridge. And so Alberta is actually really, really poised to lead on this. And then when I think about the ability, how do we transport that? Calgary is moving forward on Prairie Economic Gateway, which is an inland port. So when we think about the ability to either co-locate production or to move that production across the country of modular housing, we really stand to benefit as a city and really teach the rest of the country what we can do.
What do you take back? So you're heading back to Calgary. This is probably the same time that I'm heading back to Calgary. What do you take back to ensure that you're not just networking here, but you're bringing back real solutions to help your community, because some residents may say, oh, those politicians are just going to Ottawa to get drunk and do what they need to do. But you're here on the ground and actually attending some of these sessions. What do you bring back to ensure that the conversation doesn't end once you get on the plane?
Yeah, well, someone who doesn't drink, no one has to worry about that for me. I think the conversations that I take away is that solutions are created when municipalities are having conversations together, when we are all gathered and having conversations, and when we're supporting each other. So whether it's like helping drive the narrative and the conversation around removing provincial trade barriers, what we also heard is those relationships need to happen with our counterparts in the U.S. too. So we had a great panel on that yesterday as well. And so really just the strength of those relationship buildings, the relationship building is what is important. And actually, I haven't been to the session yet, but I'm going to one of the egg sessions this afternoon. Calgary, of course, is well poised and some opportunities in agri-food and agri-tech. And so also looking at how we involve industry and how we involve like private entities in the building out of both our physical buildings, but also our economies as well.
Final question. It's a political one, but I think you're ready for it because you're a representative of Alberta municipalities as well. But what does the city of Calgary get from coming to these events that you couldn't do on your own? Because there might be people who say, what's the point of being part of FCM? So what do you say to those people, and what is the benefit for the city of Calgary to be here?
Yeah, I think it's perspective, and both in the similarities that we share with other municipalities, but also the challenges that other municipalities are facing, in particular smaller municipalities. This convention's really highlighted rural and remote communities and the challenges that they're facing. And so how as a city can we share our expertise and knowledge in leading on that? So I also went to a session on urban reserves, and that is going to be a big thing that's going to be coming up for Calgary. So also the reconciliation standpoint and how we support prosperity for all is really critical and important. And so like that is something that I can't necessarily do on my own, but having a venue like this where, you know, I don't have my name tag on, but we can see where each other is from. And then I think...
And are you getting conversations out of other cities similar size to Calgary saying, oh, you're dealing with the same issue, let's try and...
It's actually probably the number one thing I've heard was Calgary hosted a great convention last year. and remembering that convention was actually held, like, and it started the day that the water main broke. So maybe it's just the fact that we had more coffee than they have here. No shame, Ottawa, but seriously, severe lack of coffee. But I actually just think elected leaders, like at the municipal level, realize how close we are to the people, how we're dealing with some of the same challenges and issues, and just the camaraderie that comes through the support here is really important. And I would say the other one that, climate has been a big one, right? We saw in the resolutions session, someone tried to remove climate adaptation from one of the resolutions, and it was overwhelmingly voted down. So I think also the recognition of the issues that are facing Canadians and a deep willingness to support and help and move through and have those conversations at the policy level with both our provincial governments, but also with the federal government.
Councillor Penner, always a pleasure to sit down with you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cypress County Councillor Robin Kurpiweit was also in attendance and spoke about what he was getting from the convention and how he plans to make the work done at the convention continue once he leaves from a rural perspective. Councillor Kurpiweit, thank you so much for sitting down with me. We're here at the third day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention in beautiful Ottawa, Ontario. Why does Cypress County need a representative at FCM this year?
Well, you know, to quote our CAO, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And as you know, I've been a part of FCM for a long time. I'm a big supporter of what they do. And, you know, I think that when you're involved in advocacy, you come to realize very quickly that, you know, you may be, you know, working with the federal government to try to find opportunities to work together or to advocate for funding. But, you know, it's not always about what you get. It's about making sure that you provide a good balanced approach and viewpoint so that you're also making sure that you're not, you know, seeing the other municipalities that are pushing for things that aren't quite what you're looking for, getting everything they want all the time. You got to make sure that you're out there fighting for your best too.
And what are those issues? What are the issues that you're hearing about
in Cypress County that are matching up with what's being talked about here in Ottawa at the FCM convention?
I think that the big conversation right now is always around oil and gas and resource development and making sure that we can get our products to market. That's something we hear about in Alberta all the time. When you get out here, it's important to have the conversations with other like-minded and non-like-minded organizations or municipalities that maybe don't understand quite the impact that it has, in Alberta, but also how it funds a huge part of this country. And so, being able to sit down with different leaders from different communities and have those conversations, I think, is a good thing to do.
Now, as the former, if I'm not mistaken, former chair of the Rural Forum for a Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I speak to rural municipal leaders all the time, and I get a sense that oil and gas is very prominent to them.
Yeah.
But there's concern that FCM doesn't take that serious. In your past role as Rural Forum chair, do you feel like FCM heard and advocated for the oil and gas industry as much as they could have?
Yes. I think that this is, I maybe take a bit of a controversial role in this one, or position sometimes, but the reality is that we're a big organization that has a lot of membership across the country, and the reality is that on one hand you have climate change and conversations surrounding that, and then you have oil and gas and exploration and responsible development, and you can have a conversation that involves both of them, but generally speaking, the people that are, hardcore oil and gas may be a little bit disappointed that their message is diluted a little bit. In the same hand, somebody that is hardcore on the climate change side of things, they might be a little bit frustrated that it gets watered down a little bit. The reality is that when you have a national voice that comes out, you're not going to necessarily have that same punch, but I've been involved in a lot of conversations around the board table where FCM has supported resolutions that would encourage the federal government to utilize and prioritize Canadian energy and responsibly developed oil and gas above all other foreign developed oil. And we recognize that it's important, and I think that there's just the fact that along with supporting that industry, there's certain caveats that are attached to it, responsibility, and there's a lot more education and messaging that can be done to help other municipalities understand how that works. For example, you go up into Fort Mac and you see what some of these oil sands are. It's an environmental cleanup in a lot of cases where it started off a long time ago with oil seeping out of the edge of the river, and now they're reinstating it. It's beautiful parks, and it's sometimes you see some of the pictures that are used a little bit more as propaganda, and it's not necessarily the true picture.
This year convention has a big rural theme to it. There's a Stronger Together theme.
Yeah,
but
I'm
there's
feeling
also
that.
A lot of conversation around rural issues, bail reform,
Yes.
resource access to market, whether it be in the States or other markets. What is the benefit of a rural municipality membership for FCM? Why is it important for rural members to continue to stay part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, do you believe?
Yeah, again, it's democracy. We have the ability to come out here. We have a rural municipality. The bang that you get for your buck as a rural municipality is, honestly, it's far superior to, I think, what the urbans see. We have a system where every member has a vote, and every representative that is here has a vote. But municipalities are also charged. Their membership fee is reflective of the size of their organization and how many people they have, and so you have some communities that are paying $1,000, $1,500 for membership, and they have the same ability to meet with and impact other leaders and network and communicate and advocate for and speak to resolutions, put things forward. We just need to become engaged, and I think that sometimes we get lost in the vastness of the organization and we get overwhelmed. But the opportunity that we have to have a voice as a small community, like heck, Neil Como is a great example. Him and I have worked together. He took over for me when I left the role of rural chair. I'm coming from Cypress County, 6,500 people, and chairing the rural forum and speaking to the Prime Minister's office on behalf of all rural municipalities in the entire country. As a small-time rural municipality, that's a pretty amazing opportunity for a very small amount of money. To boot, you have the conference boasts 2,500 attendees. We've got people from all over the country. It's really the only time, other than Parliament, where you have elected officials from coast to coast to coast that meet up in one place and can actually talk about things that impact our country and nation building projects. So it's make the best that you have, but the opportunity as a small rural municipality is amazing because you can use it to be at the top level very, very easily.
So you mentioned his name, so I'm going to play in the sandbox for my final question, and that is Prime Minister Mark Carney actually spoke yesterday at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention. He spoke about home building. He spoke about working with municipalities. The Liberals are traditionally stronger in urban centers rather than rural settings. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic about what the relationship with the new federal government and rural Canada, particularly even Cypress County, will be heading into this new Carney era of Canada?
So I'm going to actually take a page out of Elizabeth May's book this morning when she spoke. I don't know if you were there for that, but her comment was, I hope that Mark Carney is the best prime minister that we've ever had. I think that as Canadians, we should get behind our government. I come from very blue conservative country, and I also don't hope that our government is a mess. We've gone through 10 years of a lot of spending, a lot of chaos, and although it was a lot different than what a lot of people in my area were looking for, I'm hopeful that a lot of the things that he's brought forward, some of the house building, addressing that, the affordability side, we've got to do something. It's not good right now. I'm hopeful that we can still keep in mind the fact that a lot of these things require money. And the largest industry that we have in this country is in our energy sector. And it just seems like low-hanging fruit to not find a way to continually focus on this and really embrace the fact that we can be an international superpower when it comes down to responsibly developed oil and gas. And let's find a way to do that. Let's help that can help fund the nation building projects that he's talking about. I hope that things go well. As an advocacy group, we want to see our government and our country do well. And so to hope for them to fail would not be conducive to progressive growth. But my fingers are crossed. I'm hopeful. We'll see.
Well, Councillor Kurpiweit, thank you so much for spending time with me. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. You too.
Northern Sunrise County Reeve Corinna Williams traveled to Ottawa to hear from other municipal leaders from across the country and bring a Northern perspective to the convention.
Reeve Williams, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting in beautiful downtown Ottawa at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention. What brings you here as Reeve of your municipality to attend the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention?
Well, places like this is where we can have connections with other municipalities. We can learn what FCM is doing, trying to focus on our oil and gas pipelines. That's a message that we strongly bring from Alberta. And to meet new people, to ask them questions. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? How have you solved these issues? And we all have very similar issues, and the results of what people do can be very different, but the results are still, the outcomes are still the same, which is what we hope for.
So what are those similar issues that Northern Sunrise has that you're hearing from other municipal leaders that they're having?
Definitely the crime aspect, the revolving door, the mental health crisis that all towns are having, encampments, is something that we're hearing a lot of. And during the FCM, we've heard a lot of presentations about this as well.
Now, you and I have chatted a few times for this show, and one of the times that we chatted was about the energy industry in northwestern Alberta. And you put it on the table and you said you wanted Prime Minister Trudeau to come out to northwestern Alberta to see the oil sand, to stop calling it the dirty oil that he was calling it, or his government was calling it. You heard from Prime Minister Carney a few days ago at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention. I'm not sure if you were in the meeting, but what did you hear from Prime Minister Carney that gives you hope, or are you still pessimistic about this Liberal government?
I'm a little hesitant right now. I was hoping I would hear more about pipelines, oil and gas. He did speak of transfers and tariffs. We heard about housing, mental health, community safety, which are all aspects we all want to hear, but our energy sector was very limited in speaking, and it's been disappointing here at the FCM that we have not heard too much about the energy sector being spoken of, which really is the fuel for the rest of Canada. So we were hoping we would hear more, and that's not been the case this year.
Okay, so you've broached the subject, so I've got to play in that sandbox for a little bit, if you don't mind. What does Northern Sunrise get from FCM that you can't do on your own? Because oil and gas is a large economic driver in your area, and I say that for almost all of Northern Alberta it is. What is the purpose of Northern Sunrise being part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities if, as you said, you're not hearing about the issues that are important to you, the oil and gas issues?
So it's up to us to bring the voice here. It's up to us to advocate for our industries, our cleanliness, the industry that, again, fuels Canada, but we do it in such a responsible manner now that we're not the dirty oil that we've been plagued with. It's time that the greenness of our oil and gas sector is recognized, and unless we're here sharing that voice for all Albertans, then the rest of Canada is not going to know that.
We are also here in the National Capital. Have you had a chance to speak to any of your local MPs while in town and go meet with them while in Ottawa? I
certainly did. I actually had the chance to sit in Parliament, and our council had a wonderful tour with our administration with Arnold Viersen. So he very, very kindly took us around Parliament, so it was really fascinating to hear the history of the building from him and to have the opportunity to have a one-on-one discussion with him.
So what's next now? So I'm assuming, like me, you're heading back to Alberta unless you're staying in Ottawa, but as an Alberta girl, I don't think that is the case for you. So what do you do now with the information that you've gathered here? I'm assuming the advocacy work to make sure that oil and gas still stays on the table doesn't end once you get on the plane on Monday or Sunday night.
No, it certainly doesn't. If anything, I think our application has to be more. I think I've definitely learned here that there's still some misunderstandings of where their oil comes from. Even talking to some of the municipalities around Ottawa, they're still misunderstanding where their oil is actually coming from. So our voice still has to be strong. We still have to work with the federal government to make them understand that Alberta and rest of Canada are the drivers around Canada, but we do need to work together, and we need to be respectful of each other, and we need to be aware that we understand what each province brings. Each province of Canada has a little change in their industries, what they put forward for the rest of Canada. Alberta, of course, we know we're oil, gas, and forestry and agriculture. That is Alberta in a nutshell.
You spoke at the beginning of the interview about the crime that's going on. Bail reform is the hot topic at this year's convention. Are you hearing any substantial conversation around how we solve this? Because Prime Minister Kourtney has said there will be reforms to bail in his first week. I think he had a press conference where he mentioned that, but he didn't mention it fully in his address to the convention. What are you hoping to see around bail reform and repeat offenders that would help Northern Sunrise out to make sure people feel safe?
I think the biggest gap that's in the bail reform right now is a scenario of release, is not understanding that this repeat offender has a multitude of crime behind him and still being released. So I think we need something in place to say this offender has 10 plus behind him, then there needs to be a different scale of how this person should be released. We heard it from the RCMP. They had a discussion in one of the panels of their frustration of seeing this, and rearresting the same person only to know before they even get back to the detachment to file their paperwork that this person's out on the street again. I can't imagine them. And one piece that the Canadian Federation of Police did bring up was the morale. And I can't imagine the morale of seeing this person out again after you've done everything you can as a police officer to arrest and trying to make the community safe, only for the judicial system to release that person and back into the community, which is often very unsafe.
We are in the early days of the Kourtney government. Are you hopeful that something can change, or are you, again, pessimistic that it's going to be same old in the next year?
I am hopeful for change. I really am. I am hopeful that we're going to start having a voice. Municipalities, we know our local government, we know our people the best. We live and breathe with our people. And it's up to then governments of all levels to listen from top down and from bottom up. And I don't mean bottom up as a negative aspect. Is, to me, municipal government, we're closest to the people. Federal government, you're a little away, more away from the people. So we have those conversations in the grocery store all the time. We get phone calls, and that's our job. And that's where I don't want to move away from municipal politics, because I want to be at this level where I can speak to residents, I can hear their concerns and try and advocate for them. And if I can't answer them, I'll find an answer for them, or they may not like my answer, but they will get an answer.
It sounds like in that statement you just announced that you're running for re-election. Is that the case?
I am, definitely. Yes, I am.
Well, Reeve Williams, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule at the convention to sit down with me. Always a pleasure to chat.
Always a pleasure with you too, Chris. Thank you so much.
Former Federation of Canadian Municipalities past president and Vegreville councillor Taneen Rudyk spoke to us on the third day of the convention about the key takeaways and what delegates should be doing once they get back home to their own individual municipalities.
Councillor Rudyk, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting about your attendance here at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, both in your role as past president, past president, and also as the councillor for the great community of Vegreville, Alberta. Why is it important for you to continue to be here?
It is a great opportunity to be able to reconnect with friends across the country, literally from coast to coast to coast. It's a great opportunity to be in Ottawa this time, see the seat of government, be able to meet with our MP and hear what's happening on the newly elected government floor federally, because so much what happens there affects each of us in all of our communities. So I wouldn't miss it.
One of the big things about this year's convention is the networking. A lot of people enjoy that. That is why they come here. As past president, as a former past president of the organization, how important is that networking sessions, those individual off-the-cuff hallway conversations with the mayor of Smithers, BC, with the mayor of Yarmouth, Nova Scotia? Because it seems like that's when a lot of things get done.
Absolutely. It's the in-between conversations that are really important, and the relationships. And that's truly how we do our work, is that community building is literally what we're doing here when we gather at a large convention like this. And also the teachings and the learnings in some of the sessions, the plenary sessions. It's really great to be able to, on the big stage, hear something referring to your community or your province as an attendee, and being able to really see firsthand that we have a lot in common. And it's important to be able to build on those strengths and build on those similarities.
What should delegates take away from this week as they begin to start heading home tomorrow? We're recording this on the third day of the convention, but there's a lot of things that may stop the moment they get on the plane. They head back. As past president, as someone who's been to numerous of these conventions, I shouldn't say numerous, but a fair share, a few. What should delegates be doing once they get back to their home communities to ensure that the work here doesn't stop?
I'm also using this for myself. Take all of those business cards of the folks that you met and make sure that you follow up on that, just because, again, it is so valuable to be able to use the teachings and the learnings from other folks to build on the strength in your own community. The other thing is to feel reinvigorated and revived, being around colleagues that understand the work that you do, and being able to go back to your community feeling refreshed and ready to tackle all of those big questions on the ground and continue to make the world better right where you live.
Turning to a more local, from town of Vegreville, I apologize, perspective, what are the shared similarities that you hear about when you come to conventions like this, that you in Vegreville can go, oh, we're not alone in this scenario, that we're not just dealing with this ourselves, the other communities might be as well?
Well, we were just had the good fortune of having growth over the last number of years. We're over 6,000 people for the first time ever, which is a huge accomplishment for a small rural community. And a lot of rural communities are withering and struggling to be able to maintain basic services, never mind grow. And so it's interesting to be able to listen to other folks that are talking about building housing and supporting developers while trying to maintain quality of life, provide recreation, and whether you're huge or small, it's the same experience, just on a bigger scale. So those are some of the things that I'll be taking back. I've actually got a couple of pamphlets and business cards that I definitely need to follow up on.
My final question, and it's a semi-political one, but I feel like you're willing to answer it because you just like me that much. What does the town of Vegreville get from being part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that they couldn't do by themselves? Because you hear, I hear, and that some might say the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is that golden triangle. Vancouver issues, Toronto issues, Montreal issues. Why is it important for the town of Vegreville to be here at the convention, and why is it important to be a member of the FCM?
So our collective voices are stronger together, and it's incredibly important, particularly right now when there's a new government forming. They're making their policy decisions, and they had a mandate that they were elected on. There's a very loud, strong opposition, and so it's extremely important that some of the traditional methods of delivering money consider the voices of municipalities, longevity and sustainability. And for a small community like ours, it's incredibly important to have the strength, the ability to do research and be able to support small communities through the work of FCM. And I know personally we're at the brink of opening our industrial park. That is the long-range advocacy work that we started back in 2017 when our immigration case processing center was closing. Now we are coming full circle with some of the federal and provincial investment, as well as our investment in our community that would not have happened if we didn't have FCM at our side.
Perfect. Councillor Rudyk, always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure to have you interview me, Chris. Love it.
For a rural perspective, we turn to Cara Westerlund, president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. She spoke with us about the needs for rural communities and the role FCM can play in ensuring their voices are heard.
President Westerlund, thank you so much for sitting down with me at the third day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. First off, what does RMA get from these conventions when they attend?
Well, obviously we participate in the plenaries and with the workshops and with the speakers, so there's that aspect. But I think a bigger piece for us and more of value is just the networking opportunity and the opportunity to speak one-on-one and get to know some of our rural counterparts from across the country, whether it's from BC all the way to PEI. It's a good opportunity. It's once a year when we can all get together and have some of those conversations. And I think the biggest thing for us that we're learning and the more conversations we're having is, some of the challenges and issues that we're facing in our province on the rural landscape actually are not too much different than what somebody in rural Quebec is facing. So it does provide that good opportunity for us to connect and have those very important conversations.
One of the big events here at this convention was the release of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Report on the future of rural Canada. According to the press release, according to the press conference, the Rural Municipalities of Alberta did give some input into the report. Can you take me through the process of what you told the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on what the challenges and opportunities that lie in rural Canada and particularly rural Alberta?
So the report was just released this morning, and so far I've had a little bit of mixed reaction with what's in there. They did spend half a day interviewing myself and I think a few others from rural Alberta about our perspectives and the challenges that we're facing. A lot of the conversation was obviously around infrastructure. We talked about a little bit about the housing issue, and it was actually a very broad subject that we touched on. So it's going to be interesting to see how that is received and how well it's going to go out. It was an interesting process to go through it. I'm happy that they did take the time to reach out and do that rural report. So time will tell to see how successful it will be or not.
One of the economic drivers of Alberta, in particular rural Alberta, and you and I have talked about this on lengthy occasions, is the oil and gas industry in rural Alberta. There is concern that I've heard, and you probably hear it from your members, that oil and gas does not get its due diligence when you're at conventions like FCM. Do you feel like this is the convention that a little bit is going to be changed and maybe oil and gas might be talked about a little bit more in the future, or are you a little bit pessimistic like some of your colleagues across rural Alberta?
I try to remain optimistic, but it is difficult. I've been here for 3 days, and I don't think, unless one of us from rural Alberta brought it up, oil and gas and energy in general has not been brought up or talked about, which is interesting because we do have a new federal government in place, and we've heard the new Prime Minister repeatedly talk about energy and talk about oil and gas, and I need to look around the room right now because I'm going to, dare I say, the word pipeline and not get jumped. There's still that level of negativity out here. But I was often joking. I was out enjoying this beautiful city, and at a restaurant, and they had a fireplace going, and guess what's running? That natural gas. So I chuckled and said, I'm like, oh, I bet you Alberta is running your fireplace, and I got a little bit of a dirty look. So there's still some work to be done, and obviously a little bit disappointed that our energy sector isn't being more talked about here. And obviously we know there's some challenges on the oil and gas side, and we're very open to talking about them, but more importantly, finding the solutions to get over those hurdles that we face. I feel like people start talking about the negativity or some of the challenges we face, and they kind of start spinning their wheels in the mud. And I'm tired of that. We just pick the truck up and pick those tires up and then continue on and let them spin that way. So it is difficult. There is a large delegation here from Alberta, actually both urban and rural. And our need to get our energy and our resources out to market is not being talked about it the way that it should be.
I'm going to ask a very political question, but I feel like you're up for it. At this year's RMA convention, there was a resolution put forward around Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It failed, barely.
Barely.
Do you think FCM has heard rural Alberta's concerns after what you've just said?
I'm going to take a second to answer. Take a breath. I think they're trying. They still have a long ways to go to hit the mark. If you talk to people here from our province, particularly from Alberta and from rural Alberta, it's a mixed reaction. It's, in the past when I've come and where the support's been, it's been a very clear yes. It's still a mixed bag of emotions and support here from the rural side. I think there was an opportunity here to make rural Alberta, rural Canada heard. We talked about it. One of my board members, Josh, the Reeve from Wetaskiwin County, said it perfectly. He said, we come to these things and all we hear about is the big cities and what the big city mayors are going on and what's going on in urban. We need to make it so uncomfortable that those urban and those big city mayors are going, why are we talking about rural Canada? Why are we talking about Brazeau County, and why are we talking about Mackenzie County? We need to shift the pendulum so far the other way that's what we hear back to feel like we're going to get anywhere. So it has been incredibly difficult. I'll probably get myself into trouble for saying this, but you know me, I'm pretty open. We have met with Parliament. We were on the Hill most of actually all day Thursday. And those were meetings that we arranged, not through FCM. It was done through us. We need to get in front of a few appointed people to get some of our messaging through, and we did that. We went out and did it on our own. That being said, I understand it is complex. FCM represents over 2,000 municipalities across the country, and it is difficult. Somebody always going to feel left out somewhere. But one thing that I'm hearing, it's not just rural Alberta, it's rural Canada is feeling a little bit like they've been left in the dust. And obviously, we are the engine of this country. Your energy needs don't come from downtown Ottawa. They don't come from downtown Toronto. They don't come from downtown Vancouver. It comes from my backyard. My kids' swing set's over an active pipeline. And like you talk about eating, breathing, where your energy comes from, it comes from my backyard. We talk about agriculture. We feed the world. We feed this country. And, forestry is another huge industry out there. I'm sorry, but you're not logging in downtown Toronto. You're logging in my backyard. We talk about natural disasters, and I understand floods hit the cities as we look out over, the beautiful canal here in front of us. And I understand that, they're going to get a bit of flooding here, but we have flooding that wipes out entire communities, not
Bridges,
just
key infrastructure. Wipes out as well.
Absolutely. And our forestry industry is being decimated right now with wildfires because guess what? They can't get out there and do what they need to do because we've got being held up by government. It's so frustrating.
Are you? I know you're the eternal optimist in the room. You heard the Prime Minister speak, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Or you've listened to his speech. Melissa Lantsman was here. Gord Johns from the NDP. Elizabeth May. Are you optimistic that this government is not the government of Justin Trudeau? Because I was in that room and I saw conservatives, like rural conservatives, stand up and applaud the Prime Minister, what he was saying about pipelines or resources and housing. Are you still the continuous optimist in the sense that this government may be different than the past one?
You know what? I'll be blunt on this question. You've got the time that the watch and the clock is ticking. If something substantially isn't done, I think in the next 6 to 8 months, you're going to be at a huge loss. We're at a pivotal point right now where the federal government has a chance to really put their money where their mouth is and make some of the changes. Talk is cheap. I want to see action. And we got to move. And like I said, 6 to 8 months. I maybe could squish me out for maybe 12 months. That's being me a little bit optimistic.
By January of next year, we're lost.
We're lost. And I don't want to think about what will happen, that in that 6 to 12 month if we don't start moving. We already know we're having difficulty attracting investment. And we haven't even touched about tariffs and our issues going south of the border with our friends there. But we have a real pivotal moment right now where we can turn things around and not so be dependent on what's going on south of the border. We have a real opportunity. The biggest thing everybody was asking me, what can we do? You need to remove the tanker ban off the West Coast. You know what? It doesn't make sense to pipe our oil and gas through into Vancouver. We have another port up to the north in Prince Rupert. It's a deep water, deep well, or deep
it's
sea.
Deeper than Vancouver.
And it makes sense to go through up there because you know what? If you actually talk to northern BC, a lot of those communities are a lot like my communities. And in rural BC and rural Alberta, we have a lot of similarities. There's a lot of oil and gas activity going up in the northern part of that province. So let's remove those regulations stopping us from getting our products to market. And let's honestly put our money where our mouth is and let's get moving. Talk is cheap at this point, and
one of the big things that Mark Carney and even this convention have been talking about over the last week is bail reform. Mm-hmm. I know that is important to rural Canadians,
Absolutely.
Rural Albertans. What specifically are you looking for around bail reform to get the repeat offenders off the street so your communities, your member communities of RMA feel safe at the end of the day?
You look at it and we all talk about the revolving door and the issues that we're facing there, and it's the repeat offenders. And let's be real. We need to keep them off the street. Let's again put our money where our mouths are and keep them off the street. You know, we were just talking about it, and I was talking with Tim Tierney, first vice president with FCM, and we had a police officer in Vancouver that was doused in a chemical and lit on fire. And you know, why is the rest of the country not on fire about this? That individual was wanted on 10 warrants, and 10 violent and very serious warrants. And he was out there and was allowed to do that. Like, there is something wrong. You talk to the local detachment in my area, you know, we're roughly about 8,000 people. And, you know, I was talking with our staff sergeant. They arrested an individual for break and enter 4 times in 24 hours until finally they kept him in jail after the 4th attempt in less than 24 hours. This is the issues I'm talking about. They're incredibly real. We're not just sitting here saying, oh, things need to change. We have the examples. We're living the examples every single day. Something has to change. And you know what, I joke, but jokingly but not jokingly, you know, I often say a JP or a judge wants to release this person, absolutely. Then they stay at your house and you're responsible for looking after them because you seem to think it's fit to put them back on the street again. And we got to start holding people accountable, especially on this side. You know, we talk about in our province, and Chris, you're no stranger to this, you know, I'm even wearing my button here today. I love the RCMP. Depending on who you talk to in government and in our province, they seem to think we have an RCMP problem, but I will be loud and clear. We do not have an RCMP problem in our province or in this country. We have a judicial problem. And you know what? You can put a police officer from any municipal police service, EPS, CPS, RCMP out there, and they're going to tell you the same thing. The rules are there to do their job. They have the tools that they need. It's the judicial system that is failing Canadians.
So what's next now? Because you're going to be heading back to Alberta, like I am.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do next? Is it continue the advocacy, hope FCM gets the message that oil and gas will be on the table? What do you want to see next happen? And what do you take away to make sure that what you spoke about today doesn't fall on deaf ears?
Exactly that. The conversations need to keep happening. We got to keep pushing the needle. The emails, the phone calls. You know, we've invited out. FCM did come out. They were out in our offices actually just before this convention. We need to see more of that. We need to have more of those touch points. We got to be clear and concise with what we're asking for and what work they're doing and what they're doing to help us. And I always say, you know, I sound a little grouchy sometimes, a little grumpy, but you know, I'm actually an incredibly nice person, very, very reasonable, and I'm very open to keep having those conversations, and I want to sit at that table, but at the same time, I'm not a pushover either. So included in those conversations are going to be constructive and respectful conversations about making sure that we are actually going to make some true changes and move forward and actually do some of the things that we're talking about. And talk is cheap some of these days, but I've said it a few times here today. But I think you know me, and I think the residents in my area and the members and RMA know that I don't go down, and I don't go down easily. And I will continue to push. I will continue to carry the message and have those conversations. And I'm not afraid, and I will not be backing down.
President Westerlund, always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. So thank you, and thank you to your viewers and your listeners too.
Next, we caught up with Tyler Gandam, president of Alberta Municipalities. He shared why Alberta has such a strong showing this year at the convention, what his recent meeting with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs in the province of Alberta, Dan Williams, meant for local leaders, and what the role FCM continues to play for his province of Alberta.
President Gandam, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting about Alberta Municipalities' perspective when coming to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. From your perspective, why is it important for AB Munis to be here in Ottawa at the FCM?
I think just having a presence here with our members. I know over the last 8 years or 10 years that I've been coming to FCM, Alberta has always had probably the largest contingency of people that come to this conference across the country. And so I think it's important to know that our members feel supported here as well. Alberta Munis had a booth set up here, doing some networking and making sure that our members feel like they're supported, even when they're not in Alberta. So while that's really good, it comes down to the networking again. We hear and talk to our members a lot, but sometimes hearing and maybe sharing some of the best practices with other members of councils from across the country helps you understand that maybe what you've got going on isn't the worst thing in the world because you're not the only one, or you learn some of the new best practices or different best practices that you might be able to take home to your communities or to your province.
Are you finding those similarities unique, like homelessness, encampments, mental health and addiction, bail reform, or are you finding more granular, individual, unique issues?
No, I think you could go top 5 and say lack of housing, homelessness, mental health, addictions, healthcare, transportation, all of the things that we're dealing with across the country is very much what we're dealing with in Alberta. So to be able to hear what they're working on or maybe trying some newer innovative ways on how having to deal with it works well for us, and it gives us some stuff to take back to our members.
Alberta Municipalities, and I say that across the province of Alberta, is usually one of the top delegate people attendees here in at FCM. What does that say to you as president that municipal leaders want to be part of this conversation at that federal level?
It's fantastic, and it shows the testament of how much work our members, our councillors, our administration is doing and trying to work on being better for their communities too. Coming across the country when it was in Halifax or Fredericton, and now we're in Ottawa, Calgary last year, but we get the opportunity to have it in Edmonton next year. So
a lot easier for us to get back and forth to our houses.
It is, but it's fantastic to be able to network with people from across the country because across the country we're dealing with those same issues, and so sometimes it's just to commiserate and make sure you feel like you're not alone.
Is it just that, though, or do you try to find solutions here as well? Because when I speak to delegates, it's what's the best practice? Mm-hmm. What are you doing in your community that might work well in, say, Leduc or in Rocky Mountain House? What is it about finding the solution part of the equation that is beneficial to do this in person rather than virtually?
Yeah, and that's the important part too, right? You can learn from somebody else's mistakes so that you aren't going through the same thing. I've handed out my card a number of times for people who are asking how Wetaskiwin is dealing with homelessness, or what is Alberta Municipalities doing to support their members. I constantly get feedback that our conference, our convention is fantastic. It's amazing. And do I get a chance to go to other provincial conferences and conventions? And I do, luckily. And so it's great to see what other associations are doing, and to be able to take back some of the good things that are happening across the country.
We are living in, well, we're not living, but we're at the convention where bail reform, crime, mental health and addiction is taking front and center. I want to specifically talk about the bail reform piece because I've spoken to many of your members and that is a big concern for them. Are you happy that this is finally being talked about in an open setting? Because in Calgary, it wasn't really discussed that much. And here in Ottawa, it seems to be the hot topic. The Prime Minister came in yesterday and gave his address to the delegates, and he did talk about housing, bail reform, resources to market. Are you optimistic that the issues that your members are talking about are finally being addressed at the national stage?
I sure hope so. That's one of the things with prolific offenders. I understand that it's not a crime to be poor, but at the same time, communities shouldn't have to live in fear or not being comfortable in their own homes, because we do have a problem with homelessness, mental health, addictions, and the crime that goes along with that. So would love to see what that's going to look like, because we definitely need some changes happening there too. The revolving door isn't working.
The federal government has changed. Well, the party hasn't changed, but the guy at the top has changed. He spoke at the conference day one. What do you hope the relationship between the federal government and Alberta municipalities will be like heading forward?
I think a lot of that work is going to come through FCM. And so as the president of Alberta Municipalities, I also sit on the FCM board. So being able to take our concerns from Alberta and have it on the national stage is going to be beneficial. I think we're going to have the opportunity to utilize that position to have more contact with the federal government. And while we have different municipal, provincial issues going on in Alberta, a lot of what the federal government does has an impact on what we receive in Alberta, not just Wetaskiwin. And I think it's really important that we have that opportunity to have the conversations with the federal government.
So what's next? You go back to Alberta in a few days, and what do you take back from FCM to ensure that the conversations, the advocacy work, the networking doesn't end once you step on the plane to go back to Wetaskiwin?
Getting back and meeting with my board, letting them know what I learned here, and I do the same thing for my city.
Your board's here from gather. There's a few of them.
Yeah, for sure. Which is again showing the importance of being able to come to these conferences outside of our province. But it's our work. It's understanding what's going on across the country. And when we do we'll have our fall convention coming up. We've got 4 dates for our summer Municipal Leaders Caucus coming up. We're going to be able to share some of what we've learned and the experiences that we've had here with our members, and maybe have some answers for them when they come to us and say that they're having trouble with something going on in their community.
This next question might be a little timestamp by the time this goes to air, but northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, and even central Alberta, some communities have been evacuated. Swan Hills, particularly in Alberta. As Alberta Municipality President, you're seeing this unfold. Are you in contact with the Mayor of Swan Hills to ensure everyone's safe, that everyone is out, that any help that Alberta municipalities can rely or give to the people of Swan Hills or the people that are being evacuated is there?
Yeah. So I know Trina Jones has reached out to Swan Hills, and regularly our board members are reaching out to the towns, the villages, and the cities that are affected with some of the natural disasters that have been going on over the last couple of years. So it is important for them to know that Alberta Municipalities has their back, and if there are things that we're able to do to help them, we're ready and willing, always willing to help out where we can. I've seen some other posts from neighboring municipalities saying what's available for those residents to bring trailers, what's available in their community for resources. And so people are just coming together, and it happens so naturally. It's unfortunate that we've had so many fires, so many reasons to be evacuated over the last few years, but you're really seeing a province come together and making sure that they're helping their neighboring communities with whatever they can. And that's what we're seeing as well.
Final question on this, and that is, what is the benefit of Alberta Municipalities' participation at FCM that you couldn't do on your own?
I think access to the federal government, the relationships that have been built through FCM, their administration, previous board members, all of that stuff gets passed along. We do advocacy days here in December, so we come and meet with a bunch of the MPs, different ministers, hearing the party leaders here, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, our Deputy Leader, Melissa Lantzman, being able to come in here, have the opportunity to talk to them and hear what their priorities are, I think is important, because again, just because we're dealing with the municipal and provincial issues in Alberta doesn't mean that there is no federal impact when legislation has changed.
I'm going to pause there for a second. Mayor Gandam, thanks for chatting with me. For a quick question, I know that you, as Alberta Municipalities, but also as the City Mayor's Caucus in Alberta, just recently met with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs, Dan Williams. What was that meeting like?
It was good. We actually had Premier Danielle Smith attend virtually. A couple other MLAs.
Former McIver minister as well.
Minister McIver stopped by to say thanks. He said he still had it.
Now.
Still had it in his calendar, so he made sure on his way home from Edmonton he stopped by and said hi. Got a standing ovation. We thanked him for all of his hard work that he had done for us, and we made ourselves available through Mid-City Mayors to Minister Williams, in that when he needs a resource or he needs somebody to reach out and talk to about maybe what might work, what might not work, is equally as important as having a strong relationship. So the fact that he took the time to come there and spend the afternoon with our caucus was fantastic.
Did you get a commitment to have a meeting?
He actually committed to having time for everybody.
Wow.
So yeah, understanding that they're done now potentially done now. We'll be reaching out to his office and setting up that meeting. I'm looking forward to having a very similar relationship as I did with Minister McIver. Again, we don't always have to agree, but I do appreciate the fact that he always had time for me. From what I'm hearing from Minister Williams is he's offering the same thing. He offered a room of 24 mayors and a bunch of administrators, saying whoever wants my phone number can have my phone number. So I think he's going to be very accessible, and I think he'll be a good fit for municipalities and the members of council who will be serving with him.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
And finally, we close with one of the major highlights of the week, the acclamation of Vancouver City Councillor Rebecca Bligh as the new president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We spoke with President Bligh on the final day of the convention to discuss her plans for the year ahead and how FCM continues to serve municipalities from coast to coast to coast.
President Bligh, thank you so much for sitting down with me on the very last day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in beautiful downtown Ottawa, Ontario. First off, you've been here for the last 4 days. You've been crisscrossing for the last 10 months. How has this culminated into this weekend? How are you feeling?
Oh, it has been a wonderful weekend. As always, as you say, we visit people in their home communities, and then to have everybody together in one place here in beautiful Ottawa has just been wonderful to see. We've had a very lively few days with workshops and plenaries, study tours, all on the topics of municipal government. Of course, we started the first day with meeting with all the new ministers, or not all, but the particularly impactful ministers to municipal issues and priorities. And then, of course, the Prime Minister taking time to address our entire membership who was here. So that was wonderful.
I want to pick up on that just for a second, if you don't mind. You had the pleasure to sit down face to face with him on that stage, and all the delegates were hoping to hear something, and I think they did hear something about that renewed federal municipal relation, about having you guys as a strong partner. Are you optimistic about the future with what Prime Minister Carney has said on the stage?
Yes, I think that the Prime Minister brought a real sense of real talk and pragmatism. And so that's what we need, because that's what municipal leaders do. We don't speak high level and in the ether. We talk about on the ground and in the ground issues that are required to be city building and in community building. And I think that the Prime Minister really got that, especially being here at our annual conference at a time when decisions and programs are being developed, budgets are being put together, to really see that municipalities came out in force through the vehicle of FCM to advocate for themselves and their own home communities. And so there was just, I think, a moment of synergy in that moment where both they got to hear from the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister got to really get a sense of what FCM's all about and how strong we are together.
A few of the key takeaways that I've noticed over the last 3 days of doing interviews with delegates is housing, infrastructure, bail reform, mental health, and addiction. Those are the key themes I'm hearing over and over again. As president, you've crisscrossed Canada. Are those the key topics that you're hearing that impact every single municipality, whether they are a major metropolitan like Vancouver or Toronto, or to the smallest community of Kyle, Saskatchewan?
Absolutely. Housing, affordable housing, which also helps tackle some of those other issues related to mental health addiction. Folks need stability. They need housing stability if they're going through treatment programs. Folks who are going through rehabilitation programs through a public safety lens also need stability and housing. So the fact that the federal government is finally back in the housing game in terms of below market units of housing, which we would call that in a Vancouver context where it's extremely unaffordable, on all measures related to housing affordability and availability. The fact that the federal government's back in the housing game to build affordable housing, I think, is music to our ears here at FCM. I've been with the organization for 8 years. I've been elected for 8 years. We have not seen enough housing being prioritized at the level that folks can afford. We're talking about the workers, we're talking about frontline responders, the teachers, the nurses, those that really hold up our communities. And so, I think that the housing piece and then the infrastructure that's needed to allow that housing to be built so that a toilet flushes, so that things work, and also infrastructure that is specific to rural. We announced our rural component yesterday. We're advocating for a specific rural infrastructure fund. And why that's important, and we really did get this through to the Prime Minister, I believe, is that we can have nation-building projects, but if once those trucks leave the ports with all those goods and products, if they can't get through our roads and our bridges without hitting a bottleneck, then we've missed a massive step in being able to build that national prosperity and economic development that's going to benefit all Canadians. So I think we've really hit the mark on some of those pieces where infrastructure links to economy, housing links to mental health and addictions, and that public safety, both on the RCMP staffing side, the funding side, also is going to impact that issue of repeat offenders and bail reform as well by addressing sort of the chronic offenders while being able to actually support folks getting back into stability. So as you can hear, everything is connected that we do at the municipal level. Everything has a thread into something else, and that's what municipal leaders bring to the table when speaking to different orders of government, provincial and federal.
You talk about the rural report that was released with yourself and Neil Como, the chair of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Forum, if I'm doing that right. There seems to be a big push for rural topics at this year's convention. Why was that important? Because traditionally you wouldn't think Ottawa is the place to talk about rural communities, but it seems that at the Federation wanted to talk about rural communities this time. Why was that important for yourself and for the organization?
You know, I think there's always been a lens on rural, but perhaps not done in a way that really lifted up the voices of our rural members. We've always known it's important internally, but it's about what we project out as well. And a real focus at this time when economic development across the country is critical, and that can't just happen in our urban centers. We need to recognize that agricultural land, energy, moving goods and services, warehousing has to happen where we have a lot of land mass, and that happens in rural. Absolutely contributes to the national prosperity picture that we recognize our country is at a pivotal time to meet that moment and build, as the Prime Minister says, build, baby, build, and we're all for that, but we can't do that if we don't invest in rural, because that is really where where the rubber hits the road in terms of resource communities, and they have smaller populations there in rural Canada, so we can't simply just rely on property tax to put that infrastructure in place that's needed to make sure that the services are where they need to be for communities, and that housing is there for workers as we grow our country in a sustainable way, which means all size communities right across coast to coast to coast.
I want to talk about the future a little bit, if you don't mind, before I let you go. And you are losing Scott Pierce, but gaining Mark Dorval. Doré. Sorry, I apologize. I just had him on.
He was so Mark Doré is the mayor of Dorval. So there we go.
I knew I'd get that right. Are you excited about the future with this new board? I know it's some similar faces, but you're adding Mark the mayor onto the board, or the table officers, I should say. Are you excited about what the future of FCM looks like under the new leadership of you as full president now? I'm not sure if you were interim or sort of president, but are you excited about the future, what happens next year?
Absolutely. I mean, Scott Pierce has been a force at FCM. We wish him very well. He's retiring from municipal politics after I don't know how many decades. We'll miss him, but I know he's happy. He's going to put up that gone fishing sign and really mean it this time. So we wish him well and thank him for his many years of service to FCM. And looking at the current table officer and also the expanded executive from that, I'm very optimistic. I'm very excited. We have a hard-working team. We work together in a very unified way. We're all different, so we bring different lived experience and qualities to the table as table officers. But I also know that I can call on any of my table officers now to show up in members' communities, to do what they can. We've got each other's backs. Some of them are dealing with real emergencies in their home communities this weekend in Manitoba. Kathy Valentino, our second VP officially now. So yes, and we welcome Mayor Mark Doré as third VP, and I know he'll represent Quebec very well, the Quebec caucus, and I look forward to getting to know him better and working through this year's very ambitious advocacy agenda as we continue to build on the relationships that we started here this week with the new Prime Minister and Cabinet.
What's the advice that you give to delegates as they begin to head home? Because There's the tendency when you go to a convention that, okay, you get home and everything that you learned is just going to sit on the shelf. How do you ensure that the advocacy work that happened here, the networking that happened here as president, goes on to ensure that you're not starting fresh in Edmonton in 2026?
Think of those first, 3 folks that come to mind that you met at conference. Text them, stay in touch with them, get on their social media, find ways to stay connected. Even if it's just a couple of the hundreds of people you've met, those relationships go far. They in my experience, are folks I continue to call on as a municipal leader. Learning from one another, that networking, as you say, is a critically important part. And this really is an opportunity for professional and personal development as local leaders. We're often tasked with so many different jobs. We are the jack of all trades when it comes to growing communities, and so having that sort of anchor to bounce ideas off of or just tell someone about your day is critically important, as well as continue to lean in to the FCM work, off cycle, if you will, between conferences. We have tremendous amount of tools to help smaller, larger communities make sure that they have the information they need, the data that they need to represent their communities well, and also to continue to push with their local MPs on what are some of those issues that we're carrying forward into the coming year. So I think at the end of the day, I know we're all busy, but FCM's here to support you, and any opportunity to lean in, put your hand up, let us know what you're up to and how we can connect with you and your community. That's what this next year is all about.
Final question, it's kind of a political one, but as president, you should be prepared for it. What is the benefit of a membership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that municipalities wouldn't get by just doing the advocacy work by themselves?
It's the theme of our conference this year. We're stronger together. And the reality is that we live in a massive country with very, very different challenges from coast to coast to coast. FCM is an incredible way for all of those different priorities and perspectives to be funneled into a united voice. And in that united voice, we have a much greater chance of connecting with the federal government on our advocacy priorities, the Housing Accelerator Fund, the Canada Community Building Fund, the Green Municipal Fund, and all the other funds and the things that we do, the Infrastructure Bank. We can advocate to CMHC. We're connecting with ministers. And what we know, and we saw that with the U.S. trade crisis this year, is that things are going to happen that we have not forecasted and planned for. So the benefit of being linked into FCM is the ability for FCM to be able to respond real time to an unanticipated urgency or crisis, and already have that membership and that relationship with FCM so that you have that voice at that table when we are advocating and showing up, and have that seat at the table as a very, very significant level of government in the big picture of all orders of government to be building this country for Canadians. So we're here for our members, and so we hope that members see that the value is there for them too.
President Bligh, always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. I feel like this is the first of many conversations over the next year. Again,
yes.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for being here, Chris.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Municipal Affairs, which was only made possible by you, our generous supporters of the Cross Border Network. Your continued support and financial backing of this show makes episodes like today's possible. If you want to join the growing list of supporters, head over to the crossborderinterviews.ca website and support the show today. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, and follow us on social media. For even more content and to learn more about the stories and the people we feature on this show and our sister shows, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Again, your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and help us keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs soon. Till then.